Welcome to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership, where you'll hear insights and useful strategies, as well as lessons learned from other nonprofit leaders and valuable tips from a variety of experts. Here to help you with the challenges and opportunities you face day after day is your host and nonprofit leadership expert, Sarah Olivieri.
Hello, nonprofit leaders, and welcome to your go-to place for information and inspiration to help you be even more effective. I'm your host, Sarah Olivieri, and you're listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Today, we're going to be talking about fractional executives with my guest, Cindy Wagman. Cindy has proven you can serve yourself and others well without settling, a motto I totally believe in. Through her coaching, consulting, and speaking, Cindy currently helps nonprofit consultants shake off the shoulds, drop the scarcity hangover from the nonprofit sector, and find abundance in entrepreneurship. She is also the founder of the Fractional Fundraising Movement that connects small nonprofits and the fractional fundraisers that serve them. Cindy became a certified fundraising executive in 2009 and received her MBA from the Rotman School at the University of Toronto in 2013. She has presented online and around the world on stages for AFP, Fundraising Everywhere, Strategic Arts Management, We Are for Good, and more. She is also the former host of the top-rated The Small Nonprofit podcast and best-selling author of Raise It, The Reluctant Fundraiser's Guide to Raising Money Without Selling Your Soul. Cindy is currently the co-host of the Confessions with Jess and Cindy podcast for nonprofit serving consultants. Welcome, Cindy. It's such a pleasure to have you here. Before we dive into our topic, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself personally? Because I love for people to get to know whole people and treat everybody as whole people. So tell us a little about yourself outside of your nonprofit.
Yeah. So these days, I call myself a reluctant soccer mom. I'm also getting over a bad cold. But I joke, like, I never thought my kids would be into sports. I don't know why I thought that. It wasn't on my radar. But now both my sons play soccer. I have to drive them 3 to 4 times a week. It is our life. It's my social life. It's everything these days. So it's pretty funny because it was not what I was expecting. But aside from that, so yes, I have 2 sons. I live in Toronto, Canada, and we love entertaining people.
I love that. So we're talking about fractional executives. So to bring people along, let's just start with the basic. What's a fractional executive?
Yeah. So great question. So often we think of human resources or human capital in our organizations or in business, because fractional executives exist in the for-profit world as well, where we think we have to hire someone, and we either hire someone who is going to give us advice or someone who's going to do the work, right? Like either a consultant's going to give us advice or we're hiring in-house someone who's going to do the day-to-day work. But usually those have different levels of experience. Someone who's giving us advice or the strategy is highly experienced, and someone who's doing the work, typically in small organizations or mid-size or most organizations, they don't have that much experience. And fractional executives are this sort of middle ground for organizations or businesses who need a hybrid of the strategic oversight, but also some of the day-to-day work. And so instead of like, if I want like a C-suite level person, but I can't afford them, I'm basically hiring them for a fraction of their time and subsequently a fraction of their cost. So for example, with fundraising, I might hire someone with 10 plus years experience. And if I'm hiring them as a fractional fundraiser, they're going to be like someone who I could never afford otherwise, but I'm getting them, I'm hiring a fraction of their time and it's going to cost me more, similar to what an in-house inexperienced person would cost me.
Yeah, so many good points in there. And, I want to highlight for everyone listening, part of why I really wanted you to come on and talk about this is the for-profit world was all abuzz with fractional executives like 7 years ago, right? Like that was the rage, and now it's old hat. But it really didn't make it into the nonprofit sector yet. We're due. I like to joke, like oftentimes we're like 10 years behind in the nonprofit sector. We really need to like jump ahead on some of these trends because it's a really, really good solution for so many of the reasons you just described. So can we go in a little more specifically to, just paint the picture? What does it look like if you're a small nonprofit and you have a fractional, let's go with a fractional fundraiser. What does that look like? Like how much time are you interacting with them? What does it feel? How does it feel similar to having an employee, and how does it feel different?
Yeah. So the idea is, and so often we think consultants, and we have a picture of what consulting looks like, which is, someone who's going to come in and give us some advice, have some interviews, maybe present to the board, and then leave, or coach us. And fractional is so different. So I actually think it's most similar to when you hire in-house in terms of your expectations, with a few key differences. So they're not in-house, they're not going to be in your office. They can come visit from time to time, but generally speaking, they work remotely, and they're running their show. And what I mean is, you don't need to / shouldn't micromanage or worry about. Again, it's that they come with the strategy, so they're going to tell you what they should be doing. They're going to tell you, they're going to come up with a fundraising plan, and then they're going to implement it. So in the same way that you would expect a staff person to be a little bit flexible, to be able to respond to emerging needs and things like that, they're going to do those things, and they're going to get the work done, whether that's writing a grant or creating a email campaign or year-end campaign. Even connecting with donors and building relationships like a staff person would, but without the kind of oversight is different because they're so experienced, because they know and have that strategy. So when they work with the executive director, they're coming to report, they'll get sign off on things, usually meet about once a week. But you don't have to worry or watch too closely as long as the work is getting done. But the fundraising plan is going to tell you what work should and shouldn't get done. And that plan is created by the fractional person because they have that experience and expertise. So many organizations don't actually know fundraising strategy. And so they often are pointed in the wrong direction. So first we get pointed in the right direction, then they do the work. And again, it's designed to actually alleviate a lot of the stress that executive directors experience because it's the mental load that they carry where they're managing inexperienced people. And that creates sleepless nights and stress and all those things. So fractional executives are designed to help relieve the day-to-day work and that mental load. But it is some getting used to because it's not something we're so comfortable with in our sector yet, or at least familiar with. So it's having a little bit of faith and patience and trust of the people that you surround yourself with. But once things take off, it's like executive directors can kind of just let go. And it's such a relief. I've actually had one executive director that's worked with a fractional fundraiser only for just over a year. And she said, I don't think I would still be executive director if I didn't have a fractional fundraiser. Everything before felt so heavy and like so much work. And I was burning out. And now I just don't even have to think about it. Like I trust my fractional. I know things are happening. I see the results, and it's such a relief for me. So the idea is to get the stress off.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to play like the but Sarah, but the but Cindy game, because I know whenever I have clients who are like, I'm coaching them through something new or a little uncomfortable. This is an exercise that's really great to go through. It's like personal objection squashing. So what are some of the, but Cindy, and I'll think of one comes to mind. I'm all for it. So it's harder for me to think of like the objections. I'm like, yes, do it. But like, so I can definitely imagine someone going, but if they're not like my person 100%, am I going to lose them? Am I going to keep like, are my interests, our organization's interests always going to be top of mind? So I'd love for you to answer those or any others that you get, because I'm sure you hear them, the but Cindy's.
Yeah, for sure. And I will say fractional is not right for every organization. So I would not expect a fractional person to manage a team or anything like that. So those are like very legitimate buts. Like if you are an organization where a lot of the work is getting done immediately and you're a leader who wants immediate responses to things, first I would suggest you reconsider that. But if that's your style and you're not willing to change, a fractional's not right. And we have let go of clients. Like we had a client back in the day who would email like 4 p.m. on Friday saying like, I need this by Monday. A fractional is not the person who's going to do that for you.
I just want to interject there for a moment, because that whole thinking, right, I need this by Monday, clearly you are driving the strategy, not them. So when someone else is driving the strategy, they're going to tell you, you need this by Monday.
I'm getting
and I'm
this to you. Yeah. But they're going to get it to you a week before or what have you, whatever makes sense. So those are some situations where I don't think a fractional might be right for an organization. Some of the reluctancies I hear is around longevity. And so I recommend organizations, specifically with fundraising, start with 12-month contracts, because it actually takes that long to get results. But it's not max 12 months. It's just beginning. And so what we're seeing is multiple year engagements.
And just because I have questions in here, right? Isn't like if you were to hire in-house, 12 months would even be fast for a turnaround. I often tell people like ballpark 1 to 3 years to start seeing a return on your investment. Yeah. So okay.
Yes. Compared, if you have a budget for like a fairly inexperienced fundraiser, let's say 1 to 3 years experience, their results are going to take 3 years. But if you hire a fractional, their results are going to be faster because they are more efficient, they're more effective. And so, but still 12 months, yes, it is fast, but it's reasonable to start to see. And again, these are mostly smaller organizations. And so sometimes it doesn't take like a huge novel approach. It's about fundraising basics done on a consistent way.
And just, for anybody listening, I know I'm interjecting all over the place, but if you're thinking about, how could that be, right? Like I know we've both been consultants for a long time. When I was a consultant early on, I needed to it took me like an hour or two of taking in information to come up with the right plan. What used to take me an hour or two, I can listen for 10 to 15 minutes and then know, like, I can get the picture and generate the plan really fast, just because the patterns become super clear when you do it a lot. You have a similar experience with your own work?
Yeah, I actually, like, when I started consulting, I had a small agency, and one of my staff members who was very new to fundraising had to go on leave. And so I, as the responsible business owner, took over her workload. And I was noticing like some of the grants that would take her days to write took me like an hour, right? And I was like, or appeals, anything. And so we do build efficiency, especially most fractionals have like 10 plus years experience. And at the end of the day, if it's going to take them long, or if they have to build in a learning to their work, guess what? It's not your problem as the organization. They're not charging you for overage hours. Like there's a monthly retainer. The price is fixed. And so it's their risk, not yours, which is great. So they do work with organizations longer term. And on the other side of that, what we're seeing in our sector is in-house turnover is high. And so in-house is not necessarily long term, right? We don't have that retention of our staff. So for example, the social impact staff retention study of 2024 found that 74% of people are looking for or considering a new job this year, compared to 65% outside the sector. But for people with less than 10 years experience, it's 82%. So if you're hiring junior positions, you are going to see a very high turnover. And so this can be more stable. And at the end of the day, again, the consultant or the fractional fundraiser, fractional executive, they're shouldering some of the risk. So I teach fundraisers how to build this business model. And I've stress tested like how many clients you can manage and stuff like that. But if they're busy, that's their problem, not your problem. And they figure it out and they manage it. And the way I teach it is like we've tried lots of different things over the years. And so I know kind of what capacity looks like for most people. So yeah, that's in terms of your longevity and sort of also in terms of like focus and how many clients you can balance. Again, some people might learn that as they're doing this, but it's their problem, not yours. The other thing that I've heard organizations reluctance around is, well, what about the relationships, right? If you're coming in and you're building some relationships with our donors, then you leave, like, where does that leave us? And at the end of the day, the relationships belong to the organization in the same way that they do if you hire an in-house fundraiser. Your fractional fundraiser is going to work on those relationships, but they'll include the executive director, maybe other programming staff. They're not building these relationships in isolation. And when the contract is done, the relationship is over and it belongs to the organization. And one thing, just because I never know who's listening, a lot of people without a lot of experience in fundraising expect consultants or in-house staff to come with a Rolodex. That doesn't happen. You do not actually want a fundraiser to come in with their relationships, because as soon as they leave, those relationships leave. And it would be incredibly unethical for a fundraiser to go from organization to organization, bringing the same donors along. So you don't want that as much as you think you do. You really do want a fundraiser, a fractional fundraiser, or even in-house who's going to build up the organization and leave it in a better place than
so true. I don't even want to dive in there because we go on and on about why you don't want that. We're going to take a quick break. I definitely have some more questions for Cindy about fractional executives when we come back. The Inspire Nonprofit Leadership Podcast is here to assist people like you, executive directors, board members, and other nonprofit leaders. I want to help you unleash your full potential to advance the missions that I know you care about so deeply. I've been an executive director, board member, and now I'm a consultant and coach, and I know your challenges firsthand. I want to bring you information, inspiration, encouragement, and support so you can have the greatest possible impact. So my gift for you today is a newsletter where you can receive bite-sized weekly tips for nonprofit leaders just like you. I'll put the link in the show notes, but you can also grab it by going to pivotground.com/sign up. And I hope that those weekly tips help inspire you along with this show. All right, back to my conversation with Cindy. We're talking about fractional executives. So I have two directions I want to go in here. I'm so torn. So one is I want to ask you about fractional executives other than fundraising executives to get people's minds opening, but I also want to hear about like nuts and bolts. How do we actually bring one of these folks in? So you pick which direction, choose your own adventure.
All right. Let's do
Okay,
A then
great.
B. So in terms of other kinds of fractional executives that you can look at, honestly, there's so many. So marketing, finance, human resources. What I would say, anywhere, I haven't seen any who do programming or like the core mission work of an organization, but pretty much everything else where you are an expert in something other than the core mission, it works. The only other sort of slight variation I would say is sometimes people ask me about executive directors. You could have like a part-time executive director. In theory, you could have fractional executive director, but what I see more often is interim, which is more someone who's very focused and dedicated. They might not be full-time, but they're coming in and they're doing a bit of a turnaround or a cleanup or a refocusing of the organization during a time of transition, which is a little different than fractional. And by the way, more expensive. It should be more expensive. You need to pay a lot for someone who's going to come in and clean things up. But it's so worth it. So that's sort of, I haven't seen anyone do fractional executive director, but I've seen pretty much all the others.
I think, for those of you who this is like a new concept, or if you're, nervous about it, is, being on the expert side of things is you start to see like where you see it, and you can become kind of an expert by being in the executive director role at one organization for many years. But I have to say that even having been an executive director multiple times in different types of organizations, that, got me like 10% of the way. The rest of becoming a real expert was about working with clients where, I'm never going to be the executive director or other executive of like 50 nonprofits as an employee. But, 50, 100, more than that as a consultant, you get to this level of seeing issues. And once you have dealt with like the same issues from like different angles again and again, all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, I could totally do that as a fractional job, right? Like what's going to take one person full time is going to take me, 1 day a week or 2 days a week. And that's why, it becomes possible. And I think too, like for those nonprofits who've been hiring underqualified people, I really want to label it underqualified because, we kind of, touch around, say, oh, they're junior or whatever, but we're hiring underqualified leaders at nonprofits. I feel really passionate about this. Because we don't have the budgets. And what happens is when you hire an underqualified leader, they're not really able to show up as a leader. And then we get this imbalance of leadership. So like the number one problem I see in nonprofits is that they're understaffed. And within that, they're understaffed at the leadership level. So you might think an executive director has some like other department heads, but oftentimes when you look under the hood, like it's really one leader, like an executive director, and a bunch of people who really aren't leaders. And then we get this lopsided leadership structure that really becomes dysfunctional. And you shouldn't, like, you just might as well not spend the money at all.
You burn everyone out and then your mission suffers. I always say, like, if you're going to hire someone who's underqualified, you better have a really big professional development budget. Like one of the reasons I went and did my MBA back in the day was because I saw all the leaders around me who were promoted up within organizations and never given the tools to lead or manage, right? And so I was like, well, our sector is not giving that to us. I want to be a leader. I want to manage people. I'm going to go and learn those skills. Obviously, I have a lot of privilege to be able to go and do an MBA, but yeah, it is a chronic problem. So very often organizations don't have the bandwidth to build in that learning time and space, which is why fractional executives and what they come in and in working with your organization for a period of time, they actually do start to build the internal culture and systems and everything in place so that it is easier to bring in the right people later on in-house. But they kind of set things up properly, which can have a huge value.
Huge. So let's talk about path B. How do we actually get somebody?
Yeah.
Like, what does this process look like?
So the first thing I'll say, as I mentioned before, this isn't for everyone. So if you have zero budget to spend on human capital for fundraising, you're not ready for a fractional fundraiser. Or if you have zero budget for any of these roles, you should be thinking about hiring someone or thinking about how do I add the human capital to this function in my organization and have some budget for that. And typically, for fundraising, which is what I can speak to, what you would pay that inexperienced or what was the word we just used? Underqualified person. You're probably pretty close to a fractional. So and I'm super transparent about all the things when it comes to money because I think we all should be. Most of the fractional fundraisers I train charge between $4,000 and $5,000 a month per client. So that's about $48,000 a year plus, I think to $60,000, which is what you would typically, especially in bigger markets, pay someone without that much experience, especially if you consider taxes and benefits and all of that, right? That's really about a $40,000 salary. So you have budget, and then the first thing I would say, come find me. Go to fractionalfundraising.co. We have a directory of all the certified fractional fundraisers that I've trained and have been through our program, and you can either find them there or fill in one of our intake forms and I matchmake you. But then the rest, you don't have to worry that much about, right? They take over the onboarding. They tell you what information they need, right? It's not like onboarding a staff where you have to plan out all these activities and what do you need them to learn and read and stuff like that. The fractional fundraiser and any fractional executive is going to come in and tell you what they need. Again, it's that mental load or the mental labor you don't have to worry about. So they're going to walk you step by step. There's an onboarding process, an information and discovery phase, and then they're going to create the fundraising plan. Usually at the same time that they're creating the plan, they're doing a few put out fires or quick things that actually need to get done. So for example, if you're onboarding someone in October, November, while they're working on the fundraising plan, they're also going to start a year-end campaign, things like that, right? The work gets done while the planning gets done to some degree. So they're going to create the fundraising plan, and that's where they're going to map out the rest of the deliverables. So the big thing I would say people sort of get caught up is they think, okay, but what are you going to do? And the reality is no one outside of your organization has enough information to sit there at a distance and say, here's exactly what you need to do and here's how much money you can raise. That takes the planning process. So no fractional fundraiser that I've trained is going to say, okay, here's where we're going to focus. Here's how much we're going to raise. They're going to come in, they're going to do the plan, and the plan will outline those things. Similarly to if you hire in-house, you have a job description, but chances are that person is creating the plan that they're going to implement and focus their energies. And then they do the work. You meet with them weekly. If you need quarterly reports, they'll give you quarterly reports you can send to the board. The one thing I'll say, every organization has its own work style. And so we've seen that we adapt to your work style more than we ask you to adapt to ours. However, you can't ghost us. So if I have seen executive directors where they're so busy or there's so many other things that they keep canceling meetings and stuff like that, fractional executives need information and communication, but we can minimize that and especially minimize the time you spend on that. So it's pretty straightforward. I think.
Yeah. And what if if you don't love your fractional, what is it like? Can you just, switching to another? I mean, obviously you could just switch to another one. But do you
Yeah.
find like, obviously you're doing some matchmaking. So there must have been a need at some point to think about, finding the right
Yeah.
fit. Um,
Yes. So sometimes if you find your own, like, amazing. If I'm finding someone for you, yes, I have an intake form. I look at the kinds of fundraising you have been doing, where you are, a little bit geography, not always, and the kind of mission or work that you do. Although that some organizations get really like, I need someone with experience in environmental causes. Chances are you actually don't. But if you really feel strongly about that, let me know and I can figure that out. But yeah, for the most part, now I kind of forgot what the question was. Oh, if someone's not the right fit. So we, in the contracts that my network uses with their clients, there's a very flexible termination clause. And it's actually been used more from the fractional fundraisers. And I should be very clear. The network that I have, they're all independent consultants. So I'm not involved in any, I'm a matchmaker, like pure and pure. I don't get paid for any of that. I make my money by training people. It's a fee for service. And then the matchmaking is like my gift to the nonprofit sector. So they're all
and I'll
independent
just put in,
consultants. They all work for themselves.
that's great for people to know. And I love transparency. But even if Cindy
Yeah.
were to charge you for her matchmaking services
If
or get a
yeah.
cut from them, that would be great too,
Yeah.
because it would only align her with giving you better
Yes.
results even more. Since just
Totally.
bugging away at that scarcity mindset.
Yeah. I will say, like, I matchmake, let's call it for free, within the people who are in my network, and they pay to be there. So I train them. That's how they pay me. If I make referrals outside of my network, then typically the consultant I'm making a referral to would have a referral fee that I would get. I am a huge believer in the benefit of referral fees, and I don't want to ever downplay their significance, because there's a lot of work and labor that goes into business development and making those right connections. So if I'm connecting you with someone who's in our network, that is free for everyone. So the people I train, there's a very generous termination clause. The fractional fundraisers have used it more than organizations. So it's a 2-week notice. It's basically, you have 2 weeks. If you want to terminate things, done. I actually haven't, I think maybe there's been 1 or 2. Now, I've trained over 40 fractional fundraisers, and I've seen that organizations terminate early maybe twice. However, I have also seen fractional fundraisers terminate their contracts early because they don't get information from the organization, or there's certain things that where they feel like, I'm not set up to make this a good investment for your organization. I don't want to take your money if I can't be successful for you, so let's end this early. And that does happen too. And again, they're the experts. So if they're saying that, chances are they feel they have a lot of good information to say either you're not ready, or you're best served by someone in-house. Or we've had fractional fundraisers give very specific feedback saying, you know what, your financial controls are not in a good place. You need to fix these things before I feel ethically comfortable raising money for your organization. So those things do come up from time to time.
That makes sense. Well, we are at time, so we're going to have to wrap it up. Any final words of wisdom that you'd like to give everybody, as well as how they can reach out if they are interested in working with you? And we'll put links in the show notes as well.
Yeah. So think outside the box. I like to talk about how my journey to coming up with this model was that, we had option A, which is hire a consultant, option B, hire in-house. And we found this sort of what I call your secret answer C, something that is a better solution than the A, B, or binary decisions we often make. So if you're thinking about big decisions and you feel stuck in these two choices that don't fit, look around. There's probably something better where you can create something better. I'm super passionate about fractional executives. If you want to reach out to me or find a fractional fundraiser or become a fractional fundraiser, fractionalfundraising.co. All the information is there.
Excellent. Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you, Cindy. I appreciate you sharing your expertise so much. And thank you out there for listening, but also for all that you do to make our communities better. Take care of yourself, take time for self-care, and be sure to subscribe and listen to the next episode of Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Until then, all the best.
You've been listening to Inspired Nonprofit Leadership. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode or the bonus episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review and be sure to share with your friends and colleagues. Tune in every week for more useful insights and wisdom on nonprofit leadership. Thanks so much for all you do for the communities you serve. Until next time, all the best.